Excited for our session today, featuring Monty Robertson. It is on the lived experience from a family member's perspective on hypertension. So we'll start off with our introductions and then we'll jump right in. Thank you all again for joining us today. And we will try our best to get you off early unless we're having a really fun and lively discussion, because I know some of us are in the path of Hurricane Helene. So we'll do our best to wrap us up at 1 p.m. So we'll do our introductions, go into our session, and then we'll have our time at the end for questions and discussion. But I love to start off with introductions right now, starting off with our subject matter experts. And I can't see everyone fully, but I think I saw Dr. DePetty, so we'll get started with him. If you can share your name, your position, and your background.
Thank you, Maxine. And obviously, it's a real privilege to be a part of the team and to join you this afternoon, even with Helene coming our way, of course. My name is Don DePetty. I'm presently the Health Sciences Distinguished Professor here at the University of South Carolina and University of South Carolina School of Medicine. I'm also the previous Dean and Vice President for Medical Affairs at both institutions. I've been a longstanding member of the Constellation board as well as the Foundation board. My terms are limited, and I will be going off of those and for a temporary or even permanent nature. But I've been a longstanding advocate of Constellation and even previously CCME, and it's still the CCME Foundation. I think the reason I'm here is predominantly because I've been playing a leadership role in the WHO and the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, Global Hearts Program, the Global Hearts Program out of Geneva. But more importantly, my involvement's been with the Hearts in the Americas program under the realm of PAHO in the Caribbean and Latin America, and spent the last 11-ish, 12 years planning, implementing, and seeing tremendous progress with the Hearts program. It's initially hypertension. It's being expanded to diabetes and potentially kidney disease. And in fact, I just got back last week in Antigua and Barbuda. They were the 34th country in Latin America and the Caribbean to implement Hearts countrywide. And it's really been a terrific experience, and I think partially has led to our CDC grant and obviously getting all of us together. It's such an important issue, and I look forward to Monty and obviously the presentation, but more importantly, the discussion and where can we go, from here. Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you, Dr. DePetty. All right, Dr. Butler.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Bretler, I'm an internist in the Kaiser system. I've been helping co-lead the Kaiser Permanente hypertension program in Southern California for the last 8 years or so. I am also faculty at the Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, interest in global health. And as with Don, but not the extensive history as Don, but maybe half of that, I've been a consultant with PAHO the last 6 years or so, helping to implement hypertension programs in a number of countries in the region of the Americas. Pleasure to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Butler. Emily Ridley.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon to you all. Glad to be here today. I'm a clinical pharmacist in Columbia, South Carolina with Prisma Health. I work within a internal medicine residency clinic, working collaboratively with our healthcare team to care for our patients, lots of hypertension, diabetes, and such, but have worked with our organization at improving hypertension control and have worked with PAHO with the Hearts program as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Emily. All right, and Jametta.
Good afternoon. My name is Jametta Magwood-Golston, and I serve as the Health Equity Subject Matter Expert for Constellation Quality Health. My background is health disparities and rural health research, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. Let me know if I'm missing anyone, Kathleen. But Monty is also one of our subject matter experts, and we have a special introduction for him later. All right, and then thank you to all of our participants for joining us again today and for sharing your information in the chat. All right, so today's session is focusing on lived experience and the perspective from a caregiver and from Monty's own family members. And I think for many of us, when we think of hypertension, it's not just a medical term. It's something that we all live with, or some of us, experience on a daily basis. So it's really important for us to shed the light on what that takes on caregivers, that emotional and just practical aspect of managing hypertension as a family and as a community. So we're really excited for Monty's presentation today. And Monty is from a small town in South Carolina. He received an undergrad and BS in biology from Furman University. He attended the University of South Carolina, where he earned his MHA. He is currently the executive director for the Alliance of Healthier South Carolina, which is a cross-sector coalition of more than 60 public-private organizations working together to improve the health and well-being of South Carolina. Monty, again, is also one of our subject matter experts and also on our advisory board for the Constellation Regional Collaborative. So help me to welcome Monty, and thank you again for sharing this presentation today, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Hey, good afternoon. Just quick sound check. Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. First, I just want to thank you all for having me today to share my journey, specifically talking about my grandparents and their journey with combating hypertension. And so in today's title, Navigating Hypertension, the Power of Family, Culture, and Care. So we'll cover those things today. Certainly, hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some questions and engage the audience. Would love to hear how you guys, maybe some of your personal experience with either yourself or with your family with combating hypertension. So next slide. So before I hop into telling my family story and my story with hypertension, I do want to make sure I share this disclosure that this is informational and educational purposes only. It's based on personal experience and should not be construed as professional medical advice. So certainly go to your healthcare provider to address any health issues. So just wanted to put that out there before I hop into our presentation. Next slide. So again, today we're here specifically to talk about my grandparents, or my two best friends, Clementine and James, affectionately known as Mama and Pops. Mama and Pops have been rocking together for over 50 years. 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren later. My witty grandfather is still with my loving but sometimes nagging grandmother. And so just wanted to give you guys a little bit of context about who my grandparents are. They are born and raised in Ridgeway, South Carolina. My grandmother spent her life working at one company, her whole life, working in a mill. And my grandfather working in logging, but also as a barber. Often working every day of the week, never having a day off. Next slide. One thing I think can be said about my grandparents is their love of family. As you can see from these pictures, we love family gatherings, whether it's birthdays, holidays, any celebration. My grandparents love having family together. Many times those family gatherings certainly evolve around food. And I think this can be said for lots of family. We love to gather around food, whether it's Sunday meals, whether it's holidays or birthdays, or going out to dinner or lunch to celebrate everyone's birthdays or accomplishments. We love food. And sometimes I think some of those foods aren't necessarily the healthiest food, and sometimes comes with unintended consequences. Health can unintentionally affect our health. Next slide. And so I think with that understanding, through years of our diet, it has certainly come at a cost to our health. And so this is certainly has caused hypertension in our family. And so it was over 20 years ago that my grandparents were diagnosed with hypertension. It is when they really started seeing a physician on a regular basis. And so with that diagnosis certainly came with the need to address this issue through diet, through exercise, through medication. And certainly this has been an ongoing journey, right? And so today I'll walk you through what this journey has looked like. And it's a continuous journey. And so I will share with you all what that has looked like for my grandparents and for our family. Next slide. So again, we're talking about hypertension today, which is known as a silent killer. For many folks, there's may not come with symptoms, and prolonged hypertension certainly can have cause many health issues and many problems, including heart attack, stroke, heart failure, kidney disease, or some of the just a sample of the impact that hypertension can have on our lives. And then if we even look even closer, this disease state really affects the African American community at even higher rates. And if you add in the rural dynamics, even a greater impact on that community. And so this is a disease that hypertension-related deaths in South Carolina is over 30 people per 1,000. So it is certainly an issue that is affecting so many people across our state. Next slide. And so again, I'm going to go through just ways that our family and my grandparents are really trying to combat. And I am intentionally using the word combat because it is an ongoing battle or ongoing fight with hypertension. And certainly the ways that they're trying to combat it, certainly there's ups and there's downs. And certainly I think that's important to be noted that this is an ongoing fight, an ongoing battle. And sometimes there's setbacks, but certainly it's important that, you get back on track. And so for food, we laugh about this. I remember growing up, and it was my grandmother always getting after us, and I think the tables have turned, and we're often getting after her, specifically about diet and specifically about health. And I'm sure she's probably tired of me nagging her, but certainly I care about them, and I want them to have a good quality of life. And so we stay on them about it, right? And so I just want to outline some of those dietary changes that have been made over the years. So I can remember back, 20 plus years ago, my grandma was cooking frying food in Crisco. You get the lard out the jar and you put it in the cast iron pan and you melt it and you fry it. And certainly it was very delicious, but certainly not healthy for you. And so with the diagnosis of hypertension, my grandma certainly has cut back significantly on fried foods. Also, we have introduced to them the use of olive oil as an alternative for cooking food. And certainly, I think they've taken to that as well. I think one of the things that, and this has been on for years and years, my grandparents have eaten sweet potatoes, and they still eat sweet potatoes, beans, and certainly have started to bake their meats more. So just a couple changes when it comes to food. Certainly, we've been trying to introduce more, and again, my grandma, we have to get her back on track because she is the one who cooks the food for her and my grandfather. Introduced an alternative such as salt substitute and dash seasoning. And so these are just a couple of the ways that some of these changes with my family, I think some can be just small changes. It doesn't mean radically changing what you eat, but in many instances, we've seen how you prepare those foods. And you can see the last on here, I said, thank God for the air fryer. And so this introduced a new way of preparing food. So often on Sundays, we may cook some wings, and instead of frying those wings, we put them in the air fryer, which is definitely a better alternative to preparing those. One thing that I think is important to know about food is my grandparents do not drive, and so many times they are relying on family to either take them to the grocery store or pick up these items. And so my mom, who is lots of times gets these things, is much more of a stickler about ensuring that they are sticking to a healthier diet. But my sneaky grandmother calls up another family member and sometimes gets some of the foods that that she shouldn't have. And so I think that's important, that when we have families who are supporting families, that we're communicating with each other and that we're all on the same page when it comes to really the diet that our family, especially, grandparents and parents, should be eating. And so that was one piece of advice I would share with you guys, that family members, let's communicate and let's educate each other on which foods are healthy and which foods they should be consuming. Next slide. And so as I share with you guys really some of the changes that we've made, but I think it's important to recognize focusing on your diet does not always mean limiting everything that you like. We all have things that we like to consume that aren't always healthy for us. But I think in moderation can be okay, right? And so I have this picture to show. This is my mom, and this goes back years and years in our family, having a fish fry every year. And so we have, I remember as a kid, us having a big cast iron witch's pot and actually using wood and fire to heat the pot of oil and fry the fish. And this was really a time for celebration and bringing family together. And so that is a family tradition that we continue. We actually are having one next weekend. But I think it's important that some of these traditions, we limit them, especially when we're talking about frying foods and having foods that are unhealthy. Having those in moderation, I certainly think is important. Next slide. So I show you guys this plate. This was last Mother's Day. So there's some salmon on this plate, some cilantro lime rice, some veggies, some grilled chicken kebabs and corn. And so as a healthcare professional and also a certified nutrition coach myself, I am trying to infuse a different way of eating in our family. And so for Mother's Day this year, I prepared a healthy meal and a healthy option for my family, and they liked it. And so I think, especially as we're knowledgeable about the proper way to eat and healthier options, that we take the opportunity to expose these foods to our family members. Next slide. I've talked a little bit about this already, but just the role of food, specifically in Black culture. And so this dates back really back to slavery time, right? When slaves really got the leftover foods that were available to them. And many times the way of making them taste better, they were fried, add salt and other things that really were not healthy, but really became part of our culture over years and years and years. And so us changing our habits, this is a generational thing that's been going on for years and years and generations. And so I think that's important for us to recognize. And part of these food has become, again, part of our culture. Of course, everyone probably knows the term of soul food. And, you know, food is a way in the Black culture for us to come together, for us to celebrate. And so we pride ourselves in the good food that we prepare. But again, those foods can have negative consequences on our health. And so that can be really challenging when we're talking about navigating these foods, these cultural foods that we've had for years and years. It can be a challenge to change those things when we're used to having Sunday meals with cornbread and collard greens and, you know, fried chicken or whatever it may be. That can be a challenge to change our traditions. But I think there's a new way that we can keep those traditions, but maybe tweak them. You know, I use some examples is we're trying to get my grandma to get on board with this is we're preparing collard greens instead of using, you know, ham hock and fat back in there. Let's use some different types of seasonings and using olive oil as alternative to have the same food, but potentially prepared a little bit differently. And so we're continually to try to change those behaviors and change the way that we're preparing food. And surprisingly, I think they're actually liking the alternative ways of preparing these foods. You know, one of the dish recently was my mom was telling me about was avocado chicken salad. So instead of using mayonnaise, using avocado. And to our surprise, my grandma liked it. So I think nothing's off the table as far as sticking to our cultural foods, but preparing those in a different way. Next slide. So again, we talked about diet, but I think also it's important to talk about the power of movement and exercise. And so again, I always got to stay on my grandmother. She's a tough one, but certainly it's being resilient about talking with her about the importance of exercises. And so my grandparents often are taking walks in the neighborhood. Also, we got them an exercise bike. And so my grandfather the other day, I asked him, have you been using your bike? And he said, yeah, I did 2 hours the other day. And it's like, you did not do 2 hours. And so it's just staying, again, consistent, bringing it up, asking them, have you guys been walking? Have you been exercising? I think it's important when we're talking about helping our family members manage their health. So my grandfather's a big gardener. So I remember as a kid him having a huge garden filled with okra and corn and squash and tomatoes, watermelons. The list goes on. Certainly is downsized to a much smaller garden now, but that is a way of getting additional movement is through garden, and also provides you some healthy food. So he was really proud of showing me his collard greens last Sunday when I visited him. I wish I had included a picture of that, but I didn't. So next slide. This is a picture with me, of course, and my grandparents. They live out in Ridgeway, very rural. I'm not even sure where we were walking, but just me hanging out with my grandparents. You probably can see I had surgery and I'm wearing a sling there, but just getting out with them sometimes on a beautiful day, I think is important. So when there's opportunities to be physically active with your family members, certainly take advantage of that. Next slide. So this piece, I think, is core to everything that I've talked about today. So we've talked about diet, we've talked about exercise, we've talked about culture, but I think having that family support is crucial in addressing hypertension. And so I've listed out really 5 areas where I think the impact of family can really be beneficial in addressing hypertension. So we talked about really just the emotional support of encouraging your family members, you know, helping them to reduce their stress through support, through loving them by caring by them, which also, you know, can have effect. We've talked a lot about diet and exercise, but reducing stress can certainly benefit in reducing hypertension. The second piece around accountability. And so my mom is very diligent about managing their health. So thank God for my chart. We can easily keep up with their health. And so my mom is really the designated person in our family to help manage their health, whether it's getting them to all their appointments, making sure they have all their vaccines, their medications, whatever it may be, having that designated family member to help keep family members accountable, I think is very, very important. I think has really been beneficial with my grandparents managing their hypertension over the years. Again, lifestyle changes. So I share with you guys that I prepared a healthy meal for them and really exposing them to a different way of eating, right? And so just having family to encourage those lifestyle changes, I think is really important. Third or fourth on the list is around monitoring. So having family members to assist our family members with monitoring. You know, I don't think we've been very good about this recently, but they have blood pressure monitoring that really gotten good habit of monitoring it every Sunday during the Sunday visit, and certainly that's something we're going to get back on track. Again, you know, I talked about sometimes you have you may fall back, but certainly you can get back on track with that. And then the last part, which I think is really, really important, is just reducing that social isolation. So I like to kind of call it our family compound, where it's my grandparents, I have my aunt, my uncle that live next to them, my cousin, some other aunts and uncles, all within walking distance. And so I think just having that really strong proximity family and also having those strong bonds is really important. You know, I think, you know, from a logistical standpoint, it makes things a little bit easier having family close. You know, having family members who are passing by our grocery stores every day, who can pick up food for them and get the things they need. I certainly think that's very important as well, and certainly has had a greater impact in this journey of combating hypertension. Next slide. Just another family picture. Again, we've gotten into a habit of every time we get together for a holiday of capture these moments together. So I think this must have been last Christmas or Christmas before last. So again, just demonstrating just that strong family bond and how really that is help drive and support this effort around combating hypertension. Next slide. So we've talked about really a lot about health behaviors from diet, from exercise, but I think this piece is really important to discuss, really the access to clinical care, but not just access to clinical care, but just the trust that is involved with the patient and their physicians. And so I think for my grandparents who have, you know, had their same physician for years, and certain those physicians then retired, for a period of time, there became a challenge of identifying a new physician where my grandparents felt comfortable with them, right? And so, through that process, it meant changing the physician to find a physician that they were comfortable with, a physician that understands the cultural needs and cultural dynamics that are involved with the Black culture, and just having a physician who is willing to listen and be realistic about how we address these issues. We know my grandparents are not going to give up cornbread. They love cornbread. And so is there an opportunity to give up some other foods or change other options for them as well? And so I think that is very important. And then last, just the regular doctor visits. I think that's been very critical. So, I started my presentation talking about hypertension as being a silent killer. And so I think by having regular visits, they go twice a year and they're getting their labs and they're revisiting where they are and their medication and their diet, and having these conversations with their physician on a regular basis. So in instances where perhaps their blood pressure gets a little bit out of the normal range, there's always opportunity to catch that, right, and mitigate that from getting to the point where it leads to other complications from hypertension. And so I think that's very important and key in managing their hypertension. Next slide. And I promise I'm almost finished. So just to recap, the lessons learned from this journey, again, it's centered around health, family, and culture. Again, I talked about the setbacks and I talked about the challenges. And so this journey isn't easy, right? But we have to be resilient in this journey. There may be setbacks, but certainly we have to just get back on track. We're going through that right now, where it's, all right, we need to revisit. What are you guys eating? What is your diet? What seasonings are you using? Let's change some of those things. Let's get back on track. This is, I think, secondly, makes it a generational culture change. It's hard, right? So we've had the same foods for generation over generation. We prepare foods the same way. This is part of our identity, right? It's just part of our way of living. And so those things can be very challenging, but it doesn't mean we don't give up on addressing these issues, right? We have to start making these changes incremental. There is regular doctor visits. That was the last slide I talked about. I think that's very key. And I put in parentheses, what's a good physician? Because I think we ran into an instance where we had physicians that weren't listening, and really their only solutions was around medication. But we know a lot of these issues can be helpful with diet and exercise as well. So how can we couple that with medication to address hypertension? And so finding a physician that understands the holistic approach to addressing these issues, I think, is very important. Fourth on this list, and I have having a strong family support, or just having a strong support system in general, I think is very important. And so I think by having this support system or multiple family members who are playing different roles in this journey, it's certainly, I think it's been very beneficial with addressing hypertension with my grandparents. And lastly, I would say don't give up. It can be challenging, and sometimes you want to throw your hands up in the air. But again, we didn't get to these issues overnight as far as our diet and our culture. And certainly we're not going to mitigate and address these issues overnight. And so I would say, don't give up. And last slide, I think I have one more slide. Yeah, just me and my grandparents. So I certainly love and adore them. All my friends know about my grandparents. They even met my grandparents. They are certainly two of my best friends. And so I want them to be here for a long time. And I want them to have a quality of life. And so I have made it my personal mission, and so is my mom, that we're here to aid them in having a quality life. And so I hope they are with me a lot longer And so I appreciate you guys listening to my story today. I think we have some time perhaps for some questions.
Yes, thank you, Monty. Before we get into any questions and discussion, I want to just first thank you on behalf of Constellation and the entire team here. Thank you for sharing those wonderful pictures of your family. You have a beautiful family, and thank you for letting us, take a look into your journey and helping them combat hypertension. Um, you gave us a lot to think about, and we really appreciate your time in doing so. So, with that being said, I want to open it up to our participants and our panelists here, or SMEs, for any questions, comments for Monty.
Hi, Monty. I'll start it off. This is Jimmy.
Yeah.
When you were doing this presentation, I appreciate it because it goes all the way back about the Crisco and all of this stuff in the Lord. My question, one of the questions is that hypertension can be genetic. I have a cousin who is about your size and height, very healthy, but he is on hypertensive medication. So my question, it can be genetic because he's eating right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I intended to talk a little bit about that. So I have also been borderline hypertension. Eat pretty healthy, I exercise, all of these things. And so again, a lot of this can be genetic, right? And so that's why I think it's important to go back to the clinical care that we go to the doctor, right? And because we can say, well, I'm doing all the right things, I feel fine, I don't need to go to the doctor. And to my surprise, and it was through work that I got biometric screenings, it was like, oh, you have elevated hypertension or elevated blood pressure. And so that was what spurred me to go to the doctor. Can we trace it back to genetics? Maybe not. Maybe there was stress or other factors that were contributing to it. But certainly, I think it still drives home the point of preventative care and going to the doctor and checking your blood pressure.
Okay. And also, just to make a comment on the silent killer, hypertension can be, that happened to my father. He was going to a physician and it was not detected that he had hypertension. So by the time they did find out, he was in kidney failure. So he had to go into, on dialysis. So you made a good point about that as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monty, first of all, thank you. And thank you, and more thank you. Your grandparents are lucky to have you and the extended family. But I can only imagine, even in rural communities, which possibly could be a little closer than urban communities, there are individuals that don't have that family support, or maybe have less of that family support. How do we reach out to them? Any ideas of? And I know I know you think about this every day, but I'm here. I'm just going to say it straight out. I'm a white guy here. By the way, I'm right next to Ridgeway. I'm in Blythewood, but a completely different world. How do we reach out to those that need us even more?
Yeah, I have two comments, and I was going to talk about it in my presentation, but I'll talk about it now. So first question, I think when I think about non-traditional ways of reaching folks, right? So who are those trusted folks in the community who can be a voice to raise awareness about these issues? I know many times we go to churches, right? And certainly depending on the community, churches could be that person, right? But I think about, in Ridgeway, there's a local guy who is a rapper, and he lost a lot of weight through changing his lifestyle, and he shared about that, right? And so I think we got to think and outside the box about who can be those messengers, and to raise awareness about these issues, but also what action do people need to take, right? I think is very important. The second point I want to make, so I wanted to go, because I thought about this too, as far as there's a lot of effort around having providers that look like the patients that they serve, right? Which I certainly think there's lots of benefits behind that. My grandparents' physician now is a white man, and they absolutely love him because he listens, right? And he meets them where they are. They had, I think, a nurse practitioner before him. It was a Black female. You would think, there's that identity, that same identity, that perhaps she may be able to deliver better care, but it was their white male physician who they absolutely adore and has provided them with a high level of care. And so I think the reality is that we just don't have the workforce to reflect the population that we serve. But how do we equip and acknowledge these providers to provide culturally sensitive and culturally appropriate care to the patients that they serve? That's the piece that I think is much more important in a solution that we can work on right now. Building up the workforce that reflects the community, that's going to take time, right? That's going to take years. We all probably won't even see that. And so I think that's just a reality that we live in. And so let's focus our efforts on educating our providers that we have now on the realities of the populations that they serve.
Thank you. Thank you, Monty.
Absolutely.
Monty, I'll jump in next if I might. First of all,
Yeah.
thank you. That was such a real presentation, and it's just the kind of thing I think that you're saying is we need to be teaching providers and the whole care team of the very tangible things that people can do.
Mhm.
The healthcare providers, the team-based care, but also people like you happen to be in the health field, and so you're a nutrition coach, and you know all of this, but people like you being an ambassador, and because people will listen to you. We were glued to your presentation because you brought it home, you brought in family. And, I think, figuring out how to do more of that in a faith-based way too, to have ambassadors like you, preferably in person, but even just taping, like, what you shared with us today, and putting that in videos in various places. This works. You have to stay at it. It doesn't fix overnight. But it works, and the power of surrounding, family, caregivers. And I see that there are some community health workers who have joined us today, and I'm thrilled about that. So thank you for being here. And remembering that we have people with lived experience who live in our communities, who they may not be a physician or a nurse or a therapist, but we do have community health workers, and we have people with lived experience that we don't even call them community health workers. We call them supporters or connectors, and they may or may not be paid, but giving them these kinds of tools, because you listed on one of your slides social isolation, and what Dr. DePetty just brought up. Maybe not even having an advocate in your family, but being really socially isolated.
Yeah.
So that there aren't, identifying those people that we can reach out to in various ways with people in the community. And sometimes that is through faith-based organizations. So we could, I'm going to stop here because I get really excited about this, and I could go on and on and on. But I think these are some ways, and with the Constellation Regional Collaborative, on which you serve on our advisory board, is having more and more conversations about things like this and how we come up with some tangible goals and objectives that we can get out into our high need communities, and share and look at that progress over time.
Absolutely. That was
Thank
very
you.
well said. And I will acknowledge we're, I think my family's very, very fortunate, right, that we have family in close proximity. We have, like myself, who work in healthcare and, am a certified nutrition coach and can provide some much more specific guidance to help them combat that. But in many instances, folks don't have access to that. And so I think we got to think about what are the high touch, low tech solutions to address these issues. A pill is not always going to do it, right? What are the other things that we can do to address this issue?
And what people understand, what they hear. If your mother and you didn't go to doctor appointments with your grandparents or ask
Absolutely.
them for their papers when they come home and review them, what they hear. I know, from a personal standpoint, when my brother had his heart attack, what he heard is you can never have another hot dog. And when I came to visit him after his heart surgery, he was just like sobbing. And I said, "What is wrong?" I thought he was in severe pain. And he told me that. And I was like, no, who did that? And he had just totally misheard, no, you shouldn't be eating them every day or every week. When you eat one, have a good one and enjoy it. But, those things that, just like what did the person hear?
Right.
And was that accurate? And I think having people that can just sit down with a person after they've been to the doctor, if no one accompanies them, just those kinds of things like you're doing with your grandparents. And if there aren't close family nearby, who can do that? Can it be a neighbor? Sometimes neighbors are willing, to fill the role, but figuring that out, who can help?
Absolutely.
Monty, this is Jametta. I just want to, I think this was a really heartwarming presentation, and I just appreciate how real it was. Something I experienced with my uncle, who is suffering his own health or medical challenges, had a procedure because of, behaviors, eating, diet, just nutrition. And I go and visit him this weekend, and he's like, "Well, can you bring me some donuts? Can you make some banana pudding?" And I'm like, "Well, these are the behaviors that got us here in the first place." But it just goes back to that cultural piece. This is how we gather, and these are the things, that make us feel good. But presentations like this story, things that people beyond those of us who are in this room, they're able to connect with. These stories are so important to share beyond, just within the discipline. Providers need to hear these things as well, how they should be communicating with the individuals they are serving. His wife, she went with him to have this procedure, but really couldn't come back and convey to us, this is the care that he needed, or, his medication, his prescriptions. Well, did you ask questions? So now we know, we need to go, with her or with him, when he is going for these visits. But, back to Dr. DePetty's point, everyone doesn't have those advocates or those, communities. So it's really important for us to continue to have these conversations. So I just appreciate this. Everything you're saying resonated with me today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you all for the wonderful questions.
Can I have one more question?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Dr. Petty.
I don't want to leave. I mean, I want this to continue forever. We've got other worlds, and Monty, it's been wonderful. Monty, I have maybe this is a tough one. Yes, the lifestyle modifications, et cetera, what you talked about is absolutely critical, and even more than critical. There is that medication side too. And they go hand in hand. And Jeff is here too. We're trying to teach that they're in parallel, not series. You don't do one without the other. You do them together from the get-go. Has there been any challenges, et cetera, on the medication side for your grandparents or your community or this patient population? Reluctance, reticence, cultural difficulties or differences, if you will, or has that been gone relatively well?
Yeah, no, that has gone on very well. So, and this goes back years. My grandparents have the little daily capsules, and they put them in there. So medication adherence is not an issue at all for them. But I think it goes back to, I talk about kind of the when we talk about generation, and just with their older generation, they are very much listen to authority figures like a physician. And so I think that part is not been a challenge at all when it comes down to, well, you guys need to get COVID vaccination or any other flu vaccination. You need to change your medication. You need to make sure you're doing this. You need to come back in 6 months. They have been, and a lot of it too, I think, is driven by just my mom being their healthcare kind of representative. But we've met no reluctance as far as it relates to kind of the clinical care piece of it.
That's absolutely wonderful, Monty.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if some of that is just the trust factor that you brought up earlier, Monty, and also having the resources. But when people don't adhere to what's recommended, they're, just getting to the root, and that's where our team members, like community health workers, can figure out, why is someone not taking their medicine? Because they may not be able to afford it or get to the pharmacy to pick it up, or they're having side effects and they don't, they're feeling dizzy or sick on their stomach or whatever. And so it's just having someone who can get to the root of what the problem really is. And your grandparents are so fortunate because they have a village surrounding them. And what we have to figure out, as Dr. DePetti said, and Jametta said so well, from a health equity standpoint, what about all of those folks out there that are socially isolated, and they don't have, not only do they not have a village, they don't have even one person who can help them on their journey. So it's our responsibility to figure out, ways to help those people too, so that they can be successful as well. But we need to have part 2 and 3, Monty.
Yeah.
We need to continue this conversation.
I know there's so much more I wanted to talk about, but
yes,
certainly
and we can do that. We can plan that, in the months to come, but also in our work, our committee work in the regional collaborative, and just continuing this conversation, because this is the kind of work that makes positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I understand my story today. This is probably for a folks living in a rural community. I will acknowledge this is probably a best case scenario for them, right? They're surrounded by family. They have this support. They have a healthcare representative. So I will acknowledge this is kind of the best case scenario. But and to your point, from a system standpoint, these pieces that have contributed to them being able to manage their hypertension, how do we address these issues? Whether it's that social isolation piece, or transportation, or affordability, or access to clinical care, how do we address those issues from a system level for folks who don't have this village or this support that my grandparents have? So just want to make sure I acknowledge that and understand that we have these challenges to still address. But thank you guys again for the opportunity to share my grandparents' story and to share my family story. I absolutely adore them and love talking about them. So this was really fun and exciting for me to be able to share.
Thank you so much, Monty. What a way to end this wonderful discussion. I'll leave it with, we're not giving up, just like you're not giving up. We're not giving up, and we will have a part 2, a part 3 on your family's journey. It was a beautiful presentation. Again, thank you for sharing. Thank you to our subject matter experts and to our participants for joining us today. And I am going to hand it over to Kathleen to close us out.
Hi, guys. So just a quick reminder that we do look for case reviews to be gone over throughout the different sessions. So you can go ahead and use the link that's going to be in the chat right now. And if you have any case reviews that you'd like us to go through, we'd be happy to do that. We also have our next ECHO session. That is going to be hypertension control and team-based care and the role of the pharmacist. And that is going to be by Emily Ridley, one of our subject matter experts. That'll be October 24th. And I will be sending out a post-ECHO survey reminder. It will have the link in it. If you would please fill out the survey just so we can make sure that we are doing everything that you are wanting in the ECHO series so you can learn as much as possible. That will also entitle you to the continuing education credit. And on behalf of our Constellation Regional Collaborative team, we thank you so much for participating, and we truly thank you, Monty, for this incredible presentation. We look forward to seeing you guys next month. You have a great day and stay safe on the East Coast, you guys.
Before we hop off,
yes.
I see my mom is on here, Cynthia Hagler. So shout out to my mom.
Oh. Hello, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
We're proud of Monty as you are.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you all.
All right, y'all take care.
Take care.